In the beginning, the world was a place of wonder. Rivers flowed freely. The skies stretched wide and clear, and the earth bore fruit without labor. God walked with man, and there was peace. But that world faded. Over time, darkness crept into the hearts of men. Violence became common. Greed replaced gratitude. The cries of the innocent were drowned by the roar of pride and power. Families broke. Cities rose in rebellion. The sacred became mocked. Humanity, once created in God's image, had turned its face away, and God saw it all. He saw the corruption, the wickedness, the selfishness. Every thought of every heart was evil, constantly. The Creator who had once looked upon his creation and called it good, now grieved. It wasn't anger that filled his heart first. It was sorrow, a sorrow so deep it echoed to the heavens. The earth, once alive with purpose, now groaned under the weight of sin. And in that sorrow, God made a decision, not out of rage, but out of righteousness. He would cleanse the earth. He would start again, not because he had failed, but because humanity had chosen to forget the one who breathed life into their lungs. The skies, once gentle, would become instruments of justice. The rain, once a blessing, would become a flood. The ground, once solid beneath man's feet, would tremble under divine judgment. It would not be a storm born of chaos, but of holy sorrow. Still, even in judgment, God's heart searched for mercy. His eyes roamed the earth for someone, anyone, who still walked his ways. And then he saw him, a man, quiet, righteous, faithful, a man untouched by the madness around him. His name was Noah. Noah lived in a world that had forgotten how to pray. Yet he remembered. While others shouted, he listened. While others took, he gave. While others cursed the heavens, he built his life around obedience. He wasn't perfect, but he was different. And that difference was enough for God to whisper his name, to mark him as chosen. In a time when the earth deserved to be wiped clean, one man stood as a seed for something new. Through Noah, there would be a future, a flicker of hope in a storm that hadn't yet begun. Noah didn't hear God in thunder. He heard him in stillness. While the world chased noise, Noah chased presence. His hands worked the earth, but his heart leaned toward heaven. Every sunrise was a reminder that breath was a gift. Every meal a quiet thank you. Every act a silent offering. In a generation full of rebellion, Noah walked a different path. He didn't argue. He didn't seek applause. He simply obeyed. And that obedience was loud enough for God to hear. God took notice. In all the chaos, Noah's life rose like incense, simple, steady, and pure. While others lived for themselves, Noah lived for something greater. He taught his children to honor, not to take. He built altars, not monuments. He offered prayers, not demands. The earth trembled with sin, but Noah walked with God. And because of that walk, God spoke to him, not in riddles, not through fire, but in clarity and in purpose. He would not only be spared, he would be entrusted with the future of the world. It was in that sacred moment that God revealed his heart to Noah. All flesh has corrupted its way, the Lord said, and the earth is filled with violence. I will bring an end to all living things. But then came the call, build an ark, not a weapon, not a wall, not a tower to escape judgment, a vessel of salvation, an ark that would carry life through the storm, an ark built not with fear, but with faith. Noah did not question. He did not negotiate. He simply listened, because when God speaks to the one who walks with him, obedience becomes the only answer. The instructions were precise, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, a roof, a door on the side, and 3 levels within. Not a suggestion, an assignment. God was not vague. He was detailed. This was no small task. It wasn't just carpentry. It was calling. It was worship in wood and pitch. Noah listened with the ears of a man who knew the weight of obedience. This was more than a boat. It was a sanctuary built before flood. Noah stood in silence, the wind brushing against his beard, the weight of the task settling into his bones. He imagined the laughter that would come, the whispers, the ridicule, a man building a boat with no ocean in sight. But Noah wasn't building a boat. He was building a future. He was building trust. Every plank nailed, every beam lifted, every drop of pitch was worship. And as the days turned into months and months into years, Noah kept building, not because he saw the rain, but because he trusted the voice that said it would come. He built under a sky that had never seen rain. He built while neighbors scoffed, children mocked, and elders shook their heads. He built while nothing around him made sense. There were no clouds, no thunder, no warning, just a word. But that word was enough. While others laughed, he measured. While others drank, he hammered. While the world danced toward destruction, Noah carved out salvation with trembling hands and unwavering faith. It wasn't just wood that held the ark together. It was belief. The sound of hammers echoed across dry ground. Noah worked beneath an unchanging sky, blue, endless, and silent. There was no sign of a storm, no trace of rain, only the relentless sun and the rising questions of a watching world. They came in crowds, not to help, but to laugh. Where's your flood, Noah? Is that a boat or a monument to madness? Maybe your God forgot about you. Every word stung, but every nail driven was louder. Noah didn't respond. He didn't need to. The rising frame of the ark spoke for him. Day after day, he climbed the scaffolding. With calloused hands and a heart anchored in obedience, he built, not for applause, not for proof, but because he believed. His sons carried wood. His wife brought water. His family stood with him. Not because they saw the rain, but because they trusted the one who did. And as the structure grew, so did the whispers. Has he lost his mind? Who builds a ship in the middle of the wilderness? What kind of God asked for this? The ridicule became routine. Children mimicked him. Merchants joked as they passed by. Some threw stones, not to harm him, but to humiliate him. Yet Noah never stopped. With every sunrise, he returned to the wood. With every sunset, he rested in quiet trust. His faith was not loud, but it was immovable. The world laughed louder, but his obedience stood taller. To them, the ark was absurd, but to Noah it was sacred, a vessel of mercy in a world that no longer knew what mercy meant. And soon, that vessel would be complete. Then, one morning, the wind shifted. The sun rose the same as before. The sky still held no clouds. But something was different. They began to come, first in pairs, then in sevens, from mountains, forests, deserts, and fields. Lions walked beside lambs. Wolves did not howl. Birds flew in silence, guided not by instinct, but by command. The animals came, not because they understood, but because creation still obeyed the voice of its creator. Noah stood at the entrance of the ark, watching the miracle unfold. Elephants rumbled in the distance. Deer stepped softly. Bears moved with calm. Creatures that should fear each other walked in peace. No whip, no cage, no shouting, just order, just obedience. Even the sky grew still, as if heaven itself held its breath. The people who once mocked now watched in silence. Some began to wonder, some began to fear, but none believed. And the animals kept coming, 2 by 2, 7 by 7, one after another, like a holy procession to a sanctuary of survival. Then came the final steps, the last feathered wing, the last padded paw, the last echoing hoof upon the wooden floor. And Noah stood at the threshold, his family behind him, the world before him, a world that had been given time, and chose to waste it. Noah didn't close the door. God did. A deep, echoing sound shook the ark as the entrance sealed shut, not with force, but with finality. An invisible hand drew the line between mercy and judgment. The sky was still clear, but the time for warnings had ended. Inside the ark, there was stillness. Noah sat in silence, surrounded by the slow breathing of animals and the quiet of waiting hearts. Outside, nothing changed. The sun rose. The birds sang. Children laughed in the streets. People went on with their lives, convinced it had all been a show, an old man's delusion. But then, a wind began to blow, cold, steady, unnatural. Dark clouds began to gather, crawling across the sky like waves of judgment. A single drop fell, then another, then 1,000 more. From the heavens above and the deep below, the waters broke loose. The fountains of the great deep burst open. The skies unleashed their fury. People ran, cried, banged on the side of the ark, calling Noah's name. But the door was sealed. Inside, Noah and his family could hear the storm rise, creaking wood, trembling ground, the roar of justice in full force. And through it all they remained inside, protected not by their strength, but by their obedience. The rain had come, and with it, the reckoning. The rain did not stop. Hour after hour, day after day, the sky poured its sorrow over the earth. Thunder rolled like a voice crying from the heavens. Lightning split the sky with fury. Mountains vanished beneath the flood. Trees were ripped from their roots. Homes dissolved into the rising waters. People screamed, cried out, climbed the highest rooftops. But there was no high ground, no escape. For 40 days and 40 nights, the world was undone. Inside the ark, time slowed. Noah sat with eyes closed, his hands folded, not in fear, but in reverence. Every creak of the ark, every wave that struck the hull, every howl of wind outside was a reminder of why they had obeyed. The days blurred into one another. There was no sunrise, no sunset, only the endless drumming of rain against the ark's roof and the deep groaning of water swallowing the world. Inside, the animals stirred, some restless, some afraid, but none were harmed, because the ark was more than a boat. It was a womb of mercy, a shelter wrapped in obedience, a floating testimony that God keeps his promises. At night, Noah would sit by the dim light of a lantern. He would listen to the rain, to the silence of his sons, to the quiet breathing of his wife. And though he heard no voice from heaven, he knew God was still there, not speaking, but present. Outside, the waters rose higher. Villages disappeared. Fields became oceans. The places Noah once walked were now buried beneath endless waves. And still it rained. The world had been silenced. But inside the ark there was life. Life protected. Life preserved. Not because Noah deserved it, but because he believed. There were no answers, no explanations, just trust. 40 days, 40 nights of darkness, of patience, of holding on to a promise, even when it felt like hope had drowned. And then, without warning, the rain stopped, the last drop fell, and for the first time in over a month, the sky was silent. The storm was over, but the waiting had only just begun. Days passed, then weeks. The rain had stopped, but the world was still water. The ark floated in silence. No land in sight, no birds in the air, only an endless horizon of gray waves and waiting. Noah stood at the edge of the ark, watching the still waters. He said nothing, but in his heart a question stirred. Lord, are you still there? And though the heavens remained quiet, something in Noah whispered, wait. Then, after months of drifting, Noah opened a small window near the top of the ark. He released a raven. It soared into the vast sky, circling, searching, but it found no place to rest. No tree, no branch, no sign of life. Later, he sent out a dove, and like the raven, it returned, empty, tired, still no land. 7 days passed, 7 long, quiet days filled with prayers and breath held in hope. Then he sent the dove again. This time, it returned with something in its beak, a small branch, green, alive, an olive leaf, a sign, not just of dry land, but of peace. Noah held the olive branch in his hand, trembling, awestruck. It wasn't just a leaf. It was a whisper from heaven, a promise that the flood would not last forever. That judgment had a limit. That mercy still had the final word. The ark had carried them through the storm, but this little branch reminded them that life would begin again. Noah gathered his family. They wept, not because of fear, but because hope had returned. The waters still covered the earth, But now, they had something they hadn't felt in months, a reason to believe that the end was truly the beginning. The waters receded. Slowly, the mountains appeared, then valleys, then trees, then dry ground beneath their feet. Noah stepped out of the ark, the first man to touch the new earth. The sky was clear. The world was quiet. Everything smelled of beginning. And there on that sacred ground, Noah built an altar, not to celebrate survival, but to worship the one who had carried them through. He offered thanks. He bowed low. He acknowledged the mercy that had held them above the flood. And God responded. Fire rose from the altar, and heaven received the offering. Then, across the sky, colors began to bloom. Red, orange, violet, blue. A perfect arc stretched from one end of the heavens to the other, the first rainbow. And God spoke, not just to Noah, but to every soul that would come after him. Never again will I destroy the earth by flood. This is my covenant, and this bow is my sign. The rainbow would not only mark the end of the storm, it would forever declare the faithfulness of a God who remembers mercy, even in judgment. The world was quiet, but no longer empty. The trees shimmered with dew. The rivers flowed gently over new stones. The animals stepped onto dry land, cautious but alive. And Noah stood still. Behind him was the ark, a vessel that had become home. Ahead of him was a future yet unwritten. There were no cities, no paths, no walls or kings or towers. Only earth and promise. And in that vast, open silence, Noah did the only thing a heart full of reverence can do. He worshiped. He gathered his family. They knelt beside him, eyes lifted toward the sky, not in fear, but in awe. They had survived the storm. But more than that, they had witnessed the mercy of God. From that day forward, the rainbow would remind them. Every time the clouds formed, every time the rain returned, they would remember God keeps his word. God preserves the faithful. And even in silence, God is never absent. The ark was behind them. The world lay ahead. And so, with steady steps and renewed hearts, Noah and his family walked forward into a new beginning, under a sky painted with grace.